What happens when a beloved celebrity sits down for what should be a friendly morning chat, only to have the conversation take a turn nobody saw coming? What happens when questions cross the line from curious to confrontational, and a guest decides she's had enough? Today, we're breaking down one of the most shocking moments in morning television history. When Valerie Bertinelli walked off the Today Show set after a clash with Hoda Kotb that left everyone speechless. Before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think about this whole situation. Now, let's dive into what really happened. The interview started like any other. Valerie walked onto the set, smiling and waving to the audience. She settled into her chair across from Hoda, and the energy seemed warm, almost friendly. But that wouldn't last long. Hoda opened with what seemed like a softball question. "Valerie, it's so great to have you here. You've been so open lately about your personal journey, your growth. I think a lot of people really admire that vulnerability. Let's talk about where you are right now in your life." Valerie nodded, her smile genuine. "Thank you, Hoda, I appreciate that. You know, I'm in a really good place. I've done a lot of work on myself, a lot of healing, and I feel like I'm finally comfortable in my own skin. It's been a journey, but I'm proud of where I am." "That's beautiful," Hoda said, leaning forward slightly. "And part of that journey has been pretty public, hasn't it? The divorce, the revelations about your past relationships. You've shared a lot with your fans." Valerie's smile faltered just a bit, but she maintained her composure. Yes, I think there's power in being honest about your struggles. If my story helps someone else feel less alone, then it's worth it." Hoda nodded, but there was something in her expression that shifted. "Speaking of being honest, there's been a lot of talk online, a lot of people weighing in on your decisions. Some have been supportive, but others have questioned whether you've taken accountability for your own role in some of these situations. How do you respond to that?" The air in the studio seemed to change. Valerie's posture stiffened slightly, and her smile became more fixed. "I'm sorry, my role in what situations, exactly?" "Well, relationships are complicated," Hoda continued, her tone still pleasant but with an edge underneath. "And you've been very vocal about what others have done, but some people feel like they haven't heard you acknowledge your own mistakes. Do you think that's fair criticism?" Valerie took a breath, clearly trying to keep her cool. "Hoda, I've written an entire book about my journey, my mistakes, my growth. I've been incredibly transparent about the things I'm not proud of, so I'm not sure what more people want from me." "Sure, but there's a difference between general reflection and specific accountability, isn't there?" Hoda pressed. "For instance, when you talk about your marriage, you've focused a lot on what went wrong from the other side. But what about the choices you made, the things you could have done differently?" Valerie's jaw tightened. "I have talked about that extensively. But I think what you're really asking is whether I'm going to sit here and take all the blame for a relationship that involved two people. And the answer is no, I'm not going to do that." "Nobody's asking you to take all the blame," Hoda said, her voice smooth. "But some might say that playing the victim doesn't leave much room for growth." The words hung in the air like a slap. Valerie's eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed genuinely stunned. "Excuse me, playing the victim? Is that what you think I'm doing?" Hoda didn't back down. "I'm just reflecting what I've heard from some of your critics. They feel like you've positioned yourself as someone who's been wronged, without fully examining your own actions." Valerie leaned forward, her voice dropping but gaining intensity. "Let me be very clear about something, Hoda. Sharing my pain, my truth, my experience, that is not playing the victim. That is being human. And if people want to criticize me for that, they can. But I don't have to sit here and listen to you frame my healing process as some kind of manipulation." "I'm not saying it's manipulation," Hoda replied, her tone still measured. "I'm asking if you've considered that perspective. Because accountability is part of healing too, right?" Valerie's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. "You know what? I've been in therapy for years. I've done the work. I've looked at myself in the mirror and faced the hardest truths about who I am and what I've done. So don't sit there and lecture me about accountability when you don't know the first thing about what I've been through." The tension was palpable now. The crew was silent, and even Hoda seemed to realize she'd struck a nerve. But instead of backing off, she pushed forward. "I think that's exactly the point though," Hoda said, her voice still calm but insistent. "You've done all this work. You've been through therapy. You've written about your experiences. But when it comes down to it, are you really owning all of it? Or are you still pointing fingers?" Valerie let out a bitter laugh. "Pointing fingers? Hoda, telling the truth about what happened to me is not pointing fingers. If someone hurt you, if someone betrayed you, you're allowed to say that. You're allowed to name it." "Of course you are," Hoda agreed. "But there's a way to do that without making yourself look like you had no agency in the situation. And I think that's what people are reacting to." Valerie's voice rose slightly. "So what you're saying is that I should have stayed quiet, that I should have just smiled and pretended everything was fine, because that's what women are supposed to do, right? Just take it and never speak up." "That's not what I'm saying at all," Hoda countered. "What I'm saying is that there's a balance between speaking your truth and recognizing your part in the story. And from what I've seen, that balance hasn't always been there." Valerie shook her head, her frustration evident. You don't get it. You're sitting here in your comfortable chair, with your perfect career, asking me why I haven't been more balanced in talking about my pain. Do you have any idea how hard it is to even speak about this stuff in the first place? How much courage it takes? I'm sure it's very difficult, Hoda said, but difficulty doesn't exempt you from accountability. And I think your fans, the people who support you, they deserve to see the whole picture. The whole picture. Valerie's voice was sharp now. You want the whole picture? Fine. I was in a relationship where I felt small, where I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, where I lost myself trying to be what someone else wanted me to be. And yes, I made mistakes in that relationship. I wasn't perfect, but I was also trying to survive. So forgive me if my healing process doesn't fit into your neat little narrative. Hoda paused, and for a moment it seemed like she might soften, but then she pressed on. I hear what you're saying, Valerie, but I've also heard from people close to the situation who say things weren't quite as one-sided as you've made them seem. How do you respond to that? Valerie's face flushed. People close to the situation? What people? Are you seriously going to sit here and tell me that you've been listening to gossip and using that to question my lived experience? I'm not calling it gossip, Hoda said. I'm calling it additional perspective, and I think it's fair to ask about it. No, it's not fair, Valerie shot back, because you're essentially asking me to defend myself against anonymous sources who weren't there, who don't know what happened behind closed doors. And that's not journalism, Hoda, that's just mean. The word mean seemed to hit Hoda differently. Her expression tightened. I'm not trying to be mean, Valerie. I'm trying to have an honest conversation. Honest. Valerie's voice was incredulous now. You think this is honest? Ambushing me with vague accusations and then acting like you're just asking questions. I came here thinking we were going to have a real conversation, not a cross-examination. Nobody's cross-examining you, Hoda insisted. But you've put yourself out there in a very public way. You've written books. You've done interviews. You've shared your story on social media. So yes, people are going to have questions. People are going to want to understand all sides. Valerie leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. All sides, right, because apparently my side isn't enough. I have to defend myself against people who won't even show their faces. I have to prove that my pain is legitimate. Is that what this is about? It's about getting to the truth, Hoda said firmly. And sometimes the truth is complicated. The truth is not complicated, Valerie snapped. The truth is that I was hurt. The truth is that I've spent years healing from that hurt. And the truth is that I don't owe anyone, including you, a performance of accountability that makes them feel better about dismissing my experience. Hoda's jaw set. So you're saying you have nothing to be accountable for? That's not what I said, Valerie replied, her voice strained. But I'm also not going to sit here and let you twist my words into something they're not. I've owned my mistakes, Hoda. I've been open about them. But I'm not going to apologize for surviving. I'm not going to apologize for finally putting myself first. Nobody's asking you to apologize for surviving, Hoda said, but I think there's a difference between putting yourself first and refusing to see anyone else's perspective. Valerie's eyes flashed. Whose perspective am I supposed to see? The person who hurt me. Because I can tell you right now, I've spent enough years trying to see their perspective, trying to understand, trying to make excuses. And where did that get me? Nowhere good. But don't you think, Hoda continued, that growth means being able to look back and say, yes, this person hurt me, but I also contributed to the dynamic. That's maturity, isn't it? Valerie stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You know what? I'm done. I'm done with this conversation. And I'm done with being told that my healing isn't good enough because I won't play the game you want me to play. Hoda looked up at Valerie, her expression shifting from confrontational to concerned. Valerie, please sit down. We're just having a conversation. No, Valerie said firmly, her voice shaking slightly. This isn't a conversation. A conversation is when two people talk to each other with respect. This is you interrogating me, trying to get me to say that I'm somehow responsible for my own pain, and I won't do it. That's not what's happening here, Hoda insisted, gesturing to the chair. I'm asking legitimate questions that I think a lot of people want answered. Isn't that what interviews are about? Valerie's hands were trembling now, but her voice was steady. Interviews are supposed to be about understanding, about connection. They're not supposed to be about tearing someone down under the guise of objectivity, and that's exactly what you're doing right now. I'm not tearing you down, Hoda protested. I'm challenging you. There's a difference. Challenging me? Valerie's laugh was hollow. You're not challenging me, Hoda. You're invalidating me. Every time I try to explain my experience, you question it. Every time I talk about my pain, you suggest I'm not being honest about my role in it. That's not challenging. That's dismissing. Hoda stood up now too, her tone becoming more urgent. Valerie, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm trying to do here. I have tremendous respect for you and everything you've been through. But respect also means not treating you with kid gloves. It means asking the hard questions. Hard questions, Valerie repeated, her voice bitter. Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you came into this with an agenda. You wanted to make me look bad, to make me seem like I'm not being truthful. And you know what? I don't have to subject myself to that. I didn't come in with an agenda, Hoda said, her voice rising slightly. I came in wanting to have a real, honest discussion about your journey. But you're so defensive that you can't even hear what I'm actually saying. Valerie's eyes narrowed. I'm defensive. Of course, I'm defensive. You've spent the last 10 minutes questioning my integrity, my honesty, my healing process. What did you expect? That I would just sit here and nod along while you picked apart my life? I expected you to be able to handle a conversation that goes beyond surface-level pleasantries. Hoda shot back. You're a grown woman who's put herself in the public eye. That comes with scrutiny. Scrutiny is one thing, Valerie said, her voice low and intense. This is something else entirely. This is you using your platform to make me feel small, to make me question myself. And I've spent too many years letting people do that to me. I'm not going to let it happen again. Hoda's expression softened slightly. Valerie, I'm not trying to make you feel small. I'm really not. I just think that if we're going to talk about your story, we have to talk about all of it. Not just the parts that make you look good, all of it. Valerie's voice cracked. You think I haven't talked about all of it? I've bared my soul to the world, Hoda. I've shared things that were humiliating, things that were painful, things I wish I could forget. But apparently that's not enough for you. You need me to perform some kind of self-flagellation to prove I'm worthy of sympathy. That's not fair, Hoda said quietly. I never asked you to do that, didn't you though? Valerie challenged. Every question you've asked has been designed to make me admit that I'm somehow at fault, that my pain isn't real or isn't valid because I haven't sufficiently criticized myself. Well, I'm sorry, but I refuse to do that. I've spent too long being my own worst critic. I'm done with that. Hoda took a breath, trying a different approach. Look, I understand that this is emotional for you. I can see that. But running away from difficult conversations isn't the answer either. If you walk off this set right now, what does that say? Valerie's eyes flashed with anger. What does it say? It says that I have boundaries. It says that I respect myself enough to remove myself from a situation that's harmful to me. And if people want to judge me for that, let them. I'd rather be judged for standing up for myself than for sitting here and taking abuse. Abuse. Hoda looked genuinely shocked. Valerie, asking tough questions is not abuse. That's a very serious word. And what you're doing right now feels very serious to me, Valerie replied, her voice shaking. You're using your power, your position, to make me doubt myself. To make me feel like I'm wrong for speaking my truth. If that's not a form of abuse, I don't know what is. The studio was completely silent now. Even the crew seemed frozen, unsure of what to do. Hoda looked around, then back at Valerie, her expression conflicted. I think we need to take a breath here. Maybe we can reset and start over. No, Valerie said firmly. There's no resetting this. You've shown me exactly who you are and what this interview was really about, and I'm not interested in giving you any more ammunition to use against me. Valerie, please, Hoda said, her voice almost pleading now. Don't leave like this. We can work this out. Valerie shook her head slowly. No, we can't, because you don't even see what you've done wrong. You think you're just doing your job, asking the tough questions. But what you're really doing is perpetuating the same kind of gaslighting I've spent years trying to escape from. That's not fair, Hoda repeated, her voice strained. Maybe not, Valerie said, picking up her purse from beside her chair. But it's how I feel. And for once, I'm going to honor my feelings instead of worrying about how it looks to everyone else. Hoda reached out a hand, as if to physically stop her. Valerie, if you walk off right now, you're going to regret it. This is going to follow you. Valerie paused, turning back to face Hoda fully. You know what? Maybe it will. Maybe people will criticize me for this. Maybe they'll say I couldn't handle the heat, that I was too sensitive, that I overreacted. And you know what? I'm okay with that, because at least I'll know that I stood up for myself. At least I'll know that I didn't sit there and let someone tear me down on national television. I wasn't tearing you down, Hoda said, her voice desperate now. Valerie, please, you have to believe me. That was never my intention. Maybe it wasn't, Valerie said, her voice softer but no less firm. Maybe you genuinely thought you were doing good journalism, asking the hard questions, holding me accountable. But intentions don't erase impact, Hoda, and the impact of this conversation has been incredibly painful for me. Hoda's shoulders sagged slightly. I'm sorry you feel that way. I truly am. But I still think these are important questions that deserve to be asked. Valerie nodded slowly. And I think I deserve to be treated with basic respect and dignity when I'm vulnerable enough to share my story. We're just going to have to disagree on that. So that's it then, Hoda asked. You're just going to walk away? Yes, Valerie said simply. I am, because staying here, continuing this conversation, it's not good for me. And I've learned that I have to prioritize my well-being, even when it's uncomfortable, even when people don't understand. Hoda shook her head. I just think you're making a mistake. This isn't going to look good. Valerie's expression hardened again. There you go again. Making it about how things look instead of how they feel. That's exactly the problem. Hoda, you're so worried about optics, about the narrative, that you've completely lost sight of the human being standing in front of you. That's not true, Hoda protested weakly, isn't it? Valerie challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you've treated me like a story instead of a person. You've treated my pain like a plot point instead of something real. And I'm done being anyone's entertainment. Hoda looked down, unable to meet Valerie's eyes. For a moment, it seemed like she might apologize, might acknowledge what had happened. But instead, she just said, I hope you find peace with whatever you're going through. Valerie let out a sharp breath, almost a laugh. Whatever I'm going through, you still don't get it. What I'm going through right now is being gaslit by someone who's supposed to be a friend to women, to people who are struggling. What I'm going through is being told that my truth isn't good enough, that my healing isn't valid. And you know what the worst part is? You don't even see it. I see a woman who's clearly in pain, Hoda said quietly, and I wish I could help. You can't help, Valerie said, her voice breaking slightly, because you're part of the problem. And until you understand that, until you really look at what you've done here today, there's nothing more to say. With that, Valerie turned and walked toward the edge of the set. The cameras followed her, capturing every step. She didn't look back, didn't hesitate. Her posture was straight, her head held high, even as her hands continued to shake slightly. Hoda called after her one last time. Valerie, please. But Valerie kept walking. She moved past the cameras, past the stunned crew members, past the producers who were frantically trying to figure out what to do next. And then she was gone, disappearing through the studio doors and leaving behind a silence so thick you could almost touch it. Hoda stood there for a moment, looking lost. She glanced at the cameras, then at the empty chair where Valerie had been sitting. We're going to take a break, she finally said, her voice shaky. We'll be right back. But of course, they wouldn't be right back. Not really, because what had just happened couldn't be undone. The interview that was supposed to be a friendly chat about healing and growth had turned into something else entirely. It had become a moment that would be dissected and debated, shared and reshared, analyzed from every possible angle. And at the center of it all was Valerie, who had made the choice that so many people wished they had the courage to make. She had walked away. She had refused to participate in something that felt wrong to her, even knowing the consequences, even knowing how it would look. Some people would say she overreacted, that she should have stayed and finished the interview, that walking off was unprofessional. Others would applaud her for setting boundaries, for refusing to be diminished, for standing up for herself in a moment when it would have been so much easier to just sit there and take it. But regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, one thing is undeniable. Valerie Bertinelli made a choice in that moment. She chose herself. She chose her peace. She chose to believe that her feelings mattered more than the optics, more than the potential backlash, more than the fear of how she would be perceived. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the clash itself, not the heated words or the dramatic exit, but the fact that a woman who had spent so much of her life trying to please others, trying to be what everyone wanted her to be, finally said enough, finally drew a line, finally walked away. So what do you think? Was Valerie right to leave? Should Hoda have backed off? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel because we're going to keep bringing you the stories that everyone's talking about. What would you have done if you were in Valerie's position?